What's up, everybody? Axe Wizard here, working on my game some more, and I've done a few things since we last left off. So, first of all, it's still looking like the same, but you might notice I have a mouse cursor again. You also might notice that we have turrets that kind of work. So, right now the turrets just face towards the mouse, but, you know, it is what it is. And then I also added particle effects. And I got missiles to work how I want them to, and so it looks great. So I can zoom around the map, and I can fly sideways, and I can shoot, and the particle effects still work the way I want them to. Now the particle effects are super basic, but I'm going to improve those later now that I know how they work. Right now I don't have any like particle shape to them; they're just the default pixel. And you heard the sound of the shield go down. So, how I adjusted that, let's start with this audio fix that I did. So, first thing I did is that for my ships, let's go to my ship scene here, 2D. So you can see I have two audio stream player 2Ds here on the left here. So I have normal sound player, which is essentially what I had before, and then I have special sound player. So if we go to my script for the ship, you can see I'm just setting those here as my on-ready vars, just like I did before, except now there's two of them. And all I'm doing is a normal sound player is all the stuff that I want to just play normally, like gunshots and shield hits and ship hits. And then there's special sounds that need to happen that I don't want to be overwritten because it doesn't look like that the audio stream player 2D supports polyphony, which is being able to play multiple sounds at the same time. So to get around that, I just use more notes. And so normal sound player does what I want it to do, where, you know, if I'm shooting a cannon and say, for example, it's shooting and then, you know, I get hit by a projectile or something like that, it'll cut that sound off and it'll just play the next sound I want it to play, which is the ship getting hit. And I think that that's probably going to sound okay. If need be, I can make more of these nodes for each type of sound I need to play. So, for example, if I'm just shooting guns, all those can use an audio stream player 2D node. If I'm, you know, taking damage, I can have those on a second one, and if I can have special sounds. So I can add as many of these as I want to. This seems to be the best way to do it that I can tell, so that's what I got working. And then if we just go down to our take damage function here, let's see. So sound player 1 is playing the shields getting hit. Sound player 2 is playing the shields going down, that way we always hear it. And sound player 1 is playing the ship getting hit, not the shield. So that's how I handled that, and that seems to be working fine. I always hear when the shield goes down now, so that's cool. Another thing I realized is I didn't really talk about how I got the shields to work, just only taking damage. So in my process here, I have a manage shields function, and what this does is if we scroll down, manage shields, I'm doing exactly kind of what I did in Game Maker. So my shield sprite is an animated sprite, and it has 10 frames, basically, frames 0 through 9. And so what I'm doing is I'm getting what frame we should be using by calculating what the shield's percentage is basically. Well, instead of a percentage, it's more of a tenth. So a true percentage would be multiplying the result by 100, but since I'm just doing 10, it's just getting the nearest tenth, basically. So that's how that's working there. And then from here, I'm also handling the fade. So I'm decrementing the shield alpha. So if the shield alpha is greater than 0, then we just decrease that by 1 multiplied by delta. So that's all we're doing there. And ensure we never go negative alpha. Just capping that boundary there. And then I'm setting the frame of it. And then so what frame it needs to use. And I'm since this floor returns a float, not an integer, I have to cast it as a integer. And since we're flooring it to the nearest tenth, it should work fine. And yeah, and then we're setting our alpha, which we're setting the modulate property, which has an alpha property, and we're just setting that to what our calculated alpha is. So that's what's giving that effect. You know, every time we fire the ship, when we take damage, we're setting our shield alpha to be 1, which is causing it to pop up, and then it fades. So that's how that's working there. I still have to do shields recharging, which is a quick thing to do. I just haven't done it yet. So that's what I did there. So I just wanted to go over that because I didn't show that off before. And then I also did exporting pack scene variables. One of my awesome viewers commented, "Thank you so much, Bad Axis. I really do appreciate that. That helped a lot." So what I'm doing is, instead of like, so for example, our weapons. So let's go to a weapon scene. So let's go back to 2D, and let's go to our light cannon here. So you can see over here on the right, we have a projectile pack scene. I don't know why it's showing our ship scene. I keep dragging over the light cannon projectile, and it keeps like doing the preview of like the whole ship scene, which isn't right, but it's working. So what I'm doing here in the code is, if we go to script here, so I'm exporting this variable projectile pack scene as a packed scene type, and that allows me to just drag and drop an actual scene instead of having to do a resource path. And that also saves a little step in the code, because I don't have to load the instance or load the pack scene. I don't have to load that resource and then set the instance. I can just do, you know, pack scene instance and then verify if it's valid and move on with everything I was doing. He also recommended, before I was doing something like you know, git node, and I was doing root, and then I was doing main. He recommended a safer way to do it is just to do git tree, which has a root property, and then just add a child to that, which works just fine. And so I think I feel much safer with that. So thank you again, Bad Axis. I do appreciate that. That was those were very good tips, and yes, I love it. So let's see, what else have I been up to since the last update? Particles, obviously. So particles are cool. So I have a section here called particles. Let's go back to the scene 2D view. And if we go to something, say missile trail, you can see it has the particle like rendering right here in the editor. So you can see exactly what it's doing. And so particles are cool, man. I can choose whether they are emitting or not. I can choose the amount of particles that are emitted. I can choose like if they're explosive, like if they're emitted all in one burst. Lots of cool stuff that we can do. So I think I had this set at what, 50? Or maybe it was 25. Yeah, we'll just keep it at 50. We can do 500 if we want to. Boom, that's a missile trail. We'll do 50. So you can do all this stuff here, and there's just there's a ton of different submenus here, and this took me a little bit of time to navigate around, but once you add a new particle material here, it opens up this whole submenu that gives you all these different options. So all these options do something a little different. So we got time, like you know, the lifetime randomness of what they should be, the trail emission shape. So right now we're emitting from a point, but if we do a sphere, it will like emit from everywhere. So if we do a radius of like say 50, they'll start appearing from like all over the place. So that's kind of cool. That's awesome. So let's go back to point. Direction. So right now I just have them going direction basically to the left, because if I set it to 1 like it was, it'd be emitting the other way, and I would have to manually control that. I would have to do that calculation to be opposite what the sprite's facing. So I just initialize it to just be -1. That way it's going the right way. Since all my sprites are already facing to the right anyway, we're good to go there. So awesome. We also have to have the spread. So I can set this to like 25, and it'd be a much wider spread. I went with 5 because it seems like that's a pretty good trail. Probably make it 7 even. I think 7 looks pretty good. Yeah, cool. So I turned gravity off. This was set to something like 97 or something, I think, at the start, and I just set it to just not exist. So no gravity affects my particles. Initial velocity, I cranked it up to 150, and then velocity random, this seems to be like a ratio of this. So like if I crank this up to something like 0.8, the velocity varies like by 80% from what I can see. So that might not be what I want, but maybe I want it to vary a little bit. So if I just do 0, you know, it's going fine. But if I do something like 0.2, that gives it a little bit of life. Like some particles lag back a little bit. Let's do 0.3 maybe. Yeah, so some particles are slower. I'm just gonna keep it at 0 for now. That way it's just all thrust. Angular velocity I didn't do anything with. There's a whole bunch of just cool stuff. So damping. Let's see. What if I do 0 damping? So damping is like basically deceleration. So for example, if I crank this up to 50, the particles change a little bit. What if I do like 250? There you go. So you can see like they're just slowing down fast. If I crank it to 150, you can see it dampens it quite a bit. So I just have damping set to 0. Just go crazy. For my explosion though, I do have some damping. And then the angle, I just set it to be something like wild. I don't know why. I think I was playing with this with a different effect. Yeah. So, and then scale, if you just leave it set to 1, which is what it was, it's just literally super tiny pixels. So since I don't have a particular texture set to this particle shape, I just cranked it up to, what was it, 3? Or was it 5? I think it was 5. 5 looks right. And then it randomizes that scale by about 30%. So give or take 30%, yeah. And yeah, so I don't have any scale curve. The color, this was really cool. So for the color, you can set a gradient, and when you set that, I was able to click like this little bar here, and then I could set the initial color. So if I wanted to, I could set this to something like blue, and I could set this next stage to be something like, I don't know, green. Even yellow. Yeah, so like that looks pretty cool. We'll just set it back manually. So we'll do yellow to start, and then this one was more red, and then on this third color here, I made it gray, but I also cranked down the alpha, so it starts to fade. And so this was really neat, because what this lets me do is that this lets me specify, like, hey, I want it to burn super quick, and then like maybe I want it to fade a lot faster. You can drag these around and you can see like it burns through a lot quicker. So you can change this. Like GameMaker didn't let me do this. Like it let me do a 3-color gradient, but it didn't let me do this. And this is cool. So yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with this. And I like it. So I got a basic effect here. I'm gonna probably look up, like I'm sure OpenGameArt has some particle sprites that you can use to where you can just simply go here to texture. Actually, you can't see that because my head's in the way. Actually, I think my head might have been in the way for all of that. That's awkward. So let me just recap that. So yeah, we got the gradient texture here, and this lets me specify different colors for each of these stages, and I can add as many stages as I want, and that's awesome. And I can also drag when these stages happen. So for example, if I want the red to last longer, I only want the yellow to be a little bit, I can add that, or I can crank up that yellow and have it last a long time, or I can make this this start to fade a lot sooner. Oops, that passed the other one. That's kind of a cool effect. But yeah, it lets me control all this stuff, and I think it just looks awesome. So I am pretty happy with that. That's really cool. And then, yeah, so that's what I was able to do for that one. So let me save those changes. And then for the missile explosion, This one was a little fun to work on. Let's see. Basically, I just have it. Let's see. I have it emitting, and I have the explosiveness cranked up to 0.8. And let me see. What else do I got cranked up on this pig? So we got direction. For the spread, I put 180. Is that how I wanted it? I guess. Initial velocity, I put 150, and it randomizes it by about 50%. And let me see. Damping, I got set to 75. If I didn't have that at all, it would just go out a lot farther. But 75. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. Now the angle I set to something random. It doesn't seem to really do anything here. So I just set that to be random, and then it seems to give the projectiles a random angle, like the particles. And then I think for the direction, I think if I did spread, I did 180. That's what it makes it. That's what makes it go all the way around. Because if I just did 0, it would just do that. But if I crank it up to 180, you know, it spreads all the way around. So I don't know what flatness does. What does flatness do? I don't know. So lots of cool stuff there. And I think that's basically all I did, other than the color, which I don't know if you can see again, but I just did a similar thing that I did with the missile trail, except I made the explosion happen a little bit quicker, and then the actual fade out lasts a bit longer. But that's really what I did, and I'm pretty happy with how that looks. And working with particles in Godot is so much easier than it was in GameMaker. The fact that you get to preview what you're doing here in this 2D scene viewer here is amazing. Because in GameMaker, I had to like implement it in my code, and then I had to run the game every time and, like, you know, fire a missile, hit something, and have it explode, and see how it looks, and then make tweaks based off there, and it was a pain. So really liking this. So particles in Godot, huge win. And even just these basic squares, this looks pretty good. It's going to look a lot better when I do. You probably can't see it because of my head in the way. Let me try to move here. But there's a texture here, and you can set it to be a new texture. And so that's what sets the sprite shape, basically. So you'll be able to do all sorts of stuff with that. So I've got it on my list of things to do, to look at some different particle effects and see if I can load some in. But as of right now, I'm just making these scenes, and they're working great. Now, how I implemented these, you'll notice that my missile explosion has an audio stream player 2D attached to it, and it has a script attached to it. So when it's on ready, I'm setting the one shot to be true, and I'm setting the local chords like property of this particles 2D type to be false, because what's happening, or what I was running into, is that when I fired my missile, when the missile dealt damage and it was destroyed, it also destroyed any particle nodes that were emitting particles. And once the particles were emitted, it didn't just keep them there and then finish out their life cycle. It just got rid of them. So what I do is when my missile collides and I deal damage, if it is of type explosive, it will just instance one of these missile explosion particles, and it will also play the sound of the explosion. So that's what I did there. So let's go to my projectile code. So yeah, so we had to do two things. So for example, what I'm doing here is I'm setting these both as packed scenes. And so what that means is that in my 2D Explorer for my for any projectile, so for example my missile projectile here, you can see I've got these two variables in my inspector over here that I can drag and drop my projectile or my particle scenes. I can just drag them, drop there. So you see I've got my missile trail and I've got my explosion. So that's how that's working there. And then so I've got the one for the particle trail, and one for the particle impact, because, you know, I might want to add other trails to different weapons, and I might want to add different impacts to different weapons. And so I like having those options there. So, let's see. I don't know if I need this anymore or not, but what I'm doing is, I guess I don't really need to keep track of this. I just need to, yeah, let me get rid of this. I'm just going to add it as a child node. Add it as a child node. I was thinking I was going to have to do something like in Game Maker where I had to like keep bursting the particles or setting the region or something like that. So, but I don't need to do that with Godot. So now something isn't right. What did I do? Oh, right. I did need that because I needed to set the rotation. So let me just undo that. There we go. I probably could just set the rotation though. I'll just leave it how it is for now. But basically, I have this variable that I made that I set here, and I just add this as a child to myself. So when I fire the missile projectile, it adds that particle effect 2D particles 2D node, and we already have it as a pack scene, so we're just instancing it, and we're also checking to make sure that the pack scene doesn't equal null, because if I don't set one, the zero value for a pack scene, if you don't set a value, is just null. So the game crashes if you try to like manage stuff that, you know, obviously there's no scene to instance, so the game was crashing. But I handled that here, so just, you know, if pack scene does not equal null, that means we have something. It appears to be instanceable, so we can make an instance, make sure it's valid, and then we can set that to be our variable so we can manage it later, and then also append it to ourselves as a child. And then here I'm just simply setting the rotation of it. I set it here because I was thinking ahead to where maybe I might have heat-seeking missiles that will change their direction, and so I also want the particle trail to be changed as well. And I don't know if I necessarily need to do that yet. I'll test that when I get there, but I was just thinking ahead. So that's what that does. And then I should get rid of this print log here because I don't need that anymore. I was testing it to see if it works. And what we're doing here is we're when we deal damage, so we're calling the area owner take damage. Do we need to emit an impact particle? So we're just simply checking if our impact pack scene doesn't equal null. That means we have something. We instance it, and then what we do is we're just doing the get true root add child, because we're making this a standalone. We're not adding it to a child of us because we're about to be destroyed. We're adding it to our root scene, and we're setting the position to equal our global position. And then once we've done that, we're destroying ourselves, and then the missile explosion will destroy itself once it's done playing its particles. So that's how all that works. And yeah, that was particles. And then I also got the basic turret working. So that's really not much to even write home about. I think all I did there was in my weapon code, I was exporting a variable called fixed that would just determines if it's fixed to the ship or if it's something that can actually rotate. From there, what I'm doing here is I changed my projectile to work off of my sprite global transform rotation as opposed to my ship. And then from here in the process delta, if we're fixed, or if we're not fixed, we're not a fixed weapon, we're getting the mouse position. And I had some old code left over here that wasn't working, so we'll get rid of that. And we're just doing get local mouse position, and then what we're doing is we're subtracting the target vector, which is the mouse, from our own vector, and that gives us the direction. And I got that from where was it? Vector math here. So that was just this part here, so pointing towards a target. So that's what the Godot help manual recommended, and it seems to work perfectly fine. So there was a little bit of a weirdness about like global position and like just all that stuff. So I'm get local mouse position and then subtracting it just from my position, not my global position. That works fine. And then what I'm doing is I'm just setting the sprite rotation to be the angle of this new vector 2 that we calculated here. So that's all we're doing there. And that seems to work okay. Obviously, I have a to-do here that I'm going to have to handle this for AI too. So, because we don't want to have what we had earlier in GameMaker for like 5 episodes where it was just, you know, all the enemy turrets were pointing towards the mouse, which doesn't make much sense for non-player controlled ships. So, but with this stuff here, again, it doesn't look like much, but we've got we're almost caught up, believe it or not. If we go back and we pop open GameMaker, all right, so we're back in GameMaker. Let's run the game. So we got the title screen, obviously. I'm not worried about that. But once you're like in the game, aka my testing arena, I mean, really, what else do I have to do? So, first of all, there's a lot more ships on the screen. Second of all, we got to do AI. So that's probably the next thing I'm going to tackle, because I can get all these ships working in just a few quick minutes, actually. Because the way I have it right now is I just basically copy and paste my scene. I set my weapon nodes, I set my ship sprite, I set the size of my shield sprite, I set the collision mask, the collision shape, and then from there it's not much. So if we get it on, this probably sounds horrible. But yeah, so that's sort of where I left off with GameMaker. So we've got the title screen UI to do, which will be, I'm pretty sure, was going to be super easy. So the whole reason why I switched to Godot was that UI was going to be easier, so I'm not worried about that. So AI is the big thing left to do. So once I get AI working, then I just simply go through here and I just make ship 1, ship 2, ship 3, all the way through however many ships I had in GameMaker, which... let me see, scripts, init ship. So how many do we have here? We had 9 ships. So yeah, we had 9 different ships. So we could go and knock that out. I mean, that would take me an hour just to get all this stuff done. So I mean, again, if we look at our scene here for our ship, every ship's going to have the same sort of makeup. It's just it's going to have different weapon slots, and it's going to have different, you know, I'm going to make the size of the shield bigger or whatever, you know, to depending on the size of the ship. And I'm going to, of course, adjust the collision shape and adjust the sprite. Better than that, you know, all I have to do is go in here and just set the specific ship things and save it as its own scene, and then bam, we got another ship that's going to work the same as all the other ships. And cool. Now the AI, I think, is actually going to be probably a lot easier than I think it's going to be, because in GameMaker, let's see, script AI control, I was just using a basic state machine, which is a perfectly fine way of doing it, and I'll probably even do a similar approach in Godot. But all we're doing is basically we're just, you know, we're running our idle state, which is our default thing, and we're just sort of, you know, resetting some variables. We're stopping. Oh, I also have to do thrust particles. That's right. So yeah, there's some things left to do, but I think AI is going to be relatively easy. It's mostly the same logic. It's just doing it in Godot, and I think, you know, with Godot, it's find nearest enemy. Like I had to make this this script myself. I think it was at enemy tracking controls where I had that. Anyway, I had this whole convoluted system to keep track of, you know, all the enemies. And yeah, so I made a bunch of these functions, like find nearest enemy. Like we start at smallest distance is like 90,000. We set the closest enemy to equal no one, and then we're just going through the array length of all of our enemies. Now, the cool thing about how Godot handles this is I think I can leverage groups for a lot of this stuff, because you can add a instance to multiple groups. So when I make my ship, if we go to the code, let's see, when we're in our ready event here, we're adding ourselves to the group ships. Now, when I go to implement the faction system, I can just use groups for that. So not only is it going to be part of ships, it'll be part of, you know, faction 1 group or whatever I decide to name them or label them as. And so in GameMaker, for my testing, I had faction dudes versus faction bros. So I could easily, you know, do add to group, and we can do dudes, right? And there we go. So you're part of a group. So when I go to do my faction stuff, how I was having it work is that, you know, if whenever a ship goes to keep track of its list of enemies, and it was basically searching through all the factions that it's an enemy of, it just checks all the instances that are in that groups and just adds those IDs to its enemy list. So I think that's gonna be a lot easier. So I'm excited to get into that. I think that's gonna be my next thing. So that's what I'm gonna be working on in the future. But so far, I'm feeling a lot better with Godot. I'm starting to get more familiar with the tools available to me, so I'm not trying to nail a nail in with a wrench, and I'm not trying to, you know, screw a screw in with a hammer. I'm starting to use the right tools for the right jobs, and so I'm getting better at it, and it's making sense to me, and it's feeling a lot more intuitive. And I mean, already what I've been able to accomplish here, I mean, realistically, I think in Godot, for this project, I think I may be at 6 or 7 hours just so far. And this is learning a new engine. Yes, I'm just recreating existing functionality of something I already programmed, but this is a whole different engine, and it makes things a lot harder. And just Godot is so much easier. So yeah, so I've got ships that shoot stuff, and I have to figure out a secondary fire input. Another cool thing I didn't mention is that I also have ammo for my missiles, so if I just keep shooting, I'm going to run out of ammo eventually. But yeah, so we are just wrecking that fool, and there we go. And my missiles like start out slow, and then they kind of accelerate as they go. I think that looks awesome. And yeah, I'm just pretty happy with this. Got my turret working. I might need to center that sprite a little better, but I'm pretty happy with how it's coming out. So once I get the AI working, then it's just a matter of just going through and making the rest of my prefabs, and then I'm pretty much where I left off with GameMaker, excluding the title screen, which will be super easy. So I think the next 2 episodes are going to be getting AI working, and again, I'll just do a sort of a recap of what I was able to figure out. I don't anticipate it being too long, but yeah, and then once I'm there, I'll do the title screen UI, and then I think the next thing is where I left off in GameMaker is I'll start making the actual UI for the like the I guess world scene. So I'll have to figure out how I want to structure that, but so far it's coming along nicely, and I'm sort of amazed at the progress I've made. Is just getting caught up, just a few short episodes and a few short hours of just learning a new engine, and this engine is awesome, and I'm pumped. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.